Today's special episode of Socially Democratic is presented to you by Dunn Street. Dunn Street partners with businesses, organisations, unions and social democratic parties across Australia and the globe to train leaders, develop engagement strategies and empower people to organise for change. And in 2020, Dunn Street will continue to work with folks that want to make a difference, inspire, give hope and enable leadership to achieve their shared purpose. To find out how you can partner with Dunn Street in one of your campaigns, hit us up at dunnstreet.com.au. Hello and welcome to another episode of Socially Democratic, but not just another episode, a special episode. The local government elections in Victoria are heating up. Ballots have been sent. People are starting to vote. And we thought that we would do a special campaign edition and highlight some of the candidates, some of the social democratic candidates that are running across the state. And we wanted to focus it on women candidates who are running in local government for the very first time, putting their hand up in local government for the very first time. And I was reminded by a badge that was given to me by my former field director, Claire Keys-Liley, which was a Women's Organising Network badge that says, "Men of quality support women of equality." So I thought I would live by the values that are on that badge and hand the microphone over to the three guests that we're going to have today, and they can talk about their experiences in running for public office for the first time, some of the barriers that exist in wanting to put your hand up and how they've overcome those barriers and the challenges of actually just running a campaign and raising funds and trying to get out there and communicate with the electorate during COVID. Not an easy thing to do. So our three inspiring women that will be on today's show is Amy Muratore, who is running in the Yarra Ranges Council, which is, for those of you outside of Victoria, is sort of the Dandenongs, sort of peri-urban part, lovely part of the country actually. Wesa Chau, who's put her hand up, and she is on the Labor ticket for the City of Melbourne, the first time that the Labor Party has an endorsed ticket running in the City of Melbourne elections, and Wesa is running in the position of Deputy Lord Mayor. And Ismene Thiveos, who is running in the Moreland, or the People's Republic of Moreland as we used to call it, running in one of the wards there. So we're going to be hearing from those three women, and they're going to have a conversation about what it's like to run in local government. So I'm looking forward to hearing that. And also we're going to put in the notes for today's podcast links to their campaigns. So if you want to donate to any of their campaigns or all of their campaigns, or if you want to volunteer, they've got phone banks running all the way up until when polls close. Hit those links and give your support to these inspiring women, these social democrats that are running in these important elections. And it's great to see a lot of women putting their hand up. And here's three that I'm highlighting that I want you to support their candidacy. If you can't physically do that, then give them some money so they can actually run a campaign and make sure that they are successful on election day. And also don't forget to subscribe to Socially Democratic via all of your favourite podcast apps, and also to follow us on our socials, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and what's the other one? Twitter. How can I forget Twitter? All right, let's hand it over to the team, and here's today's episode.
Hello and welcome to this special episode of Socially Democratic. On today's episode, your regular weekly host, Stephen Donnelly, has handed over the microphones to three women who are running in the Victorian local government elections currently held across the state. My name is Wesa Chau, and on today's podcast, I'm joined by Amy and Ismene, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves to kick things off.
Thanks, Wesa. I'm Ismene Thiveos. I work as a public health researcher, and I'm passionate about protecting our community services. I'm running in Moreland, and actually all three generations of my family live in Moreland. So it's been really interesting throughout the campaign to get an intergenerational perspective on how they think I'm going. We are a metro council, however, it is so vastly diverse in demographics. We have the high-profile suburb of Brunswick, but then also, while less known suburbs, but just as thriving, such as Fawkner and Oak Park.
Thanks, Wesa. My name's Amy and I'm a government school teacher who is a mum to a very active toddler. a wife to Jono, and a passionate local to Upwey. I'm running in the street ward in the Yarra Ranges. Now, the Yarra Ranges is about 34 k's out of Melbourne. Some of you might know it for the beautiful lush green forests, our lyrebirds, our echidnas, the Thousand Steps, Puffing Billy, a very unpopular McDonald's. It is a place that people love to come and visit. It's a place I think that all Victorians have a soft spot for, but it's the place I was born and raised. And I'm really passionate about hopefully bringing a really unique perspective to council as a primary caregiver and a local teacher who's really ingrained in our community. It's a really exciting ride.
Thank you. So, and I'm Wesa Chau. I'm running in the City of Melbourne election as Deputy Lord Mayor candidate, and I'm an entrepreneur and a social innovator. Melbourne is very, very diverse, and we have a very different voting systems than any other councils as well. So we have the leadership team as well as the councillor team. And the interesting thing about Melbourne is businesses have 2 votes. Residents and landlords only have 1, and non-citizens such as international students, as long as they rent a property or if they own a property, they can also vote.
Great. So I thought maybe to kick us off, we'll start talking about what inspired each of us to run for public office. I might ask you, Amy, first.
Okay. Well, just to give you a snapshot of the Yarra Ranges, this is a community that is a lot of people who grew up here, move away, they go and do their city thing, or they, like me, I lived a year abroad, and you come back to raise your family because the community out here is super connected. As well as the idyllic lifestyle. We've got all the groovy things that you have in Moreland, there is many, but we've also got beautiful forests and, you know, you're connected to nature, large blocks, all the things that, you know, you dream of when you're thinking about, you know, owning a home. So it's a lovely place to live. But when I looked at the makeup of Yarra Ranges Council, I was horrified. 9 councillors, 1 being female and no one under 50. I welcomed my daughter 2 years ago, and I started to rely heavily on council services, maternal child health, toy libraries, swimming pools, walking tracks, footpaths, all the things that when you walk out your door, councils support and fund, became a really big part of my world. And I was horrified to see that my voice and my demographic, and I would argue that the changing demographic of the Dandenong Ranges, which is young families, was not represented on our council. And I wanted to change that. I wanted to make sure that I was not just sitting back and complaining, and I was the change that I wanted to see. Also, being a teacher, I think I have skills that will be welcome on council. You know, teachers are strategic and active communicators. We set a lot of strategic direction, and we are at the core of community. I think that's a really unique perspective to bring at a local government level. And yeah, here I am just sort of giving it a go. It's interesting for me because although I am a proud member of the Australian Labor Party, we don't endorse candidates in the Yarra Ranges. So I am actually running as a self-funded independent, which is it's a very interesting experience, and we can definitely talk more about the pros and cons of that later.
Yeah. Thanks, Ames. Wesa?
Yeah, so I'm running because I wanted to ensure voices of our diverse and often unrepresented communities are fairly represented at the centre of policy decision making. So I'm very passionate about cultural diversity, multiculturalism, gender, you know, a whole range of diversities and intersectionalities. And I've often seen culturally diverse communities have often been forgotten when decisions are made because they're not on council, they're not in state parliaments or, you know, federal parliaments. It's like trying to get men to make inclusive policies for women. It just doesn't happen, right? And we just have to look at the federal budget that came out this week to know that if you've got all men trying to make decisions for so-called everybody, women will just miss out. And it's the same for culturally diverse communities as well. If you're not at the decision-making table, they're often forgotten.
So true. I think, you know, similar sentiment here. I love my community. I love talking to people. And I think that's, you know, been a really big reason of why I put my hand up. But I also have this background in public health and family violence prevention. And that's what I'm really passionate about. And I think I've, sat in enough meetings and studies to realize that sometimes you've got to put your hand up and kind of just be the change that maybe you think, that you want to see. So, I think it's just my strong sense of social justice and my passion for seeing, a different way that we can do things for people that really inspired me. And of course, it's so hard. Like, I think one thing that I've struggled with is that once you make that decision, it might be really hard to actually put your hand up. So now I also want to talk about, it's really exciting when you make the decision, but it's also really hard to get to the process of making the decision to run. I do want to talk about my experience, but I also want to hear maybe from Wesa first about what were the challenges and barriers, or just the mental conversation that you were having in your head about, wanting to run or whether you should run.
I think one of the things that was really hard was thinking about, because Melbourne City Council is quite a high-profile city council, and because you don't always win in elections, and the conversation is, well, if I don't win, will I get another chance? And whether, because also with me, we're an endorsed team, a Labor endorsed team, and so we went through the pre-selection process. So the question have been, well, if I run this time, if I don't actually get in, will I actually get pre-selected again in the future? So it's things like this that prevents me from making that decision. And so, yes, it is a difficult decision to make often for women.
I know that's such a good point, because a lot of people, when I talk to my friends, there's an idea that it's mostly the personal cost. And there is that, it's the personal pride and just this is something you've wanted to achieve. But in a bigger sense, it's the professional cost too for women. And I think you've really hit the nail on the head about that. What does that mean for a future run? And what does that mean, how my peers or my political peers might see me in the future? So, yeah. Amy?
I completely echo that experience. For me, I'm a young mum, so it had to be a family decision. This is something, like you said, when you talk about the personal cost, I've been playing this delicate game from day dot, which is I'm trying to prove to the community that I am able to handle and prioritise and be really, really good at doing all the things that mums do every day, which is spinning, heaps of plates. But I've had to also play that game that I can do this and I can give this the attention that it deserves. So it had to be a family decision. That's the first thing for me. But it also had to be, when you talk about professional standing in the community, I'm a local primary school teacher. So putting your hand up for public office reflects on your school community. And I had to have a conversation with my principal. I had to make sure that parents were okay with me putting myself out in that way in the community. I teach in the school, in the ward that I'm seeking to represent. My face is everywhere. Kids are asking questions. So it was delicate, because I'm like, if I do this and I make one mistake and there's some kind of scandal or whatever attached to it, it affects not just my opportunities within running for, public office in the future. It reflects on my professional career and my standing in my community, which I love, which scares the absolute bejesus out of me. And I often wonder, do men have this kind of same emotional turmoil inside their heads, or do they just go for it? And I think, I can't answer that question, but I do think it's a little less emotionally taxing for men who decide to run.
No, for sure, because I think there has been this idea that leadership roles are obviously going to fall to the hands of men, right? So if they want to take on this extra responsibility for the community, they're quite applauded. Where if women take on that extra opportunity to have a leadership skill, it's like, well, can you manage this on top of being a caregiver, a teacher?
Oh, the amount of times I've had I take 2 Zoom meetings a night. put my daughter to bed. I'm on the phone till 9:30 at night. And the amount of times that people ask me, well, you're a teacher, how are you going to fit this in around being a teacher? Well, actually, I teach part-time and I can do it. No one's asking the guy that's a lawyer that works full-time if he's going to be able to fit it in around his full-time job. You know, what are you going to do with your daughter? Well, frankly, that's none of your business what I'm going to do with my daughter. She'll go into care and she'll be cared for by professionals, and she has a dad, and we have a supportive family and friends network, and she will miss out on nothing. But you have to play the game, because if you do answer the way that you want to answer, you're too aggressive. You know, you can't. Sometimes you just can't win.
And also people see, will criticise women more harshly as well. So if you make one mistake as a woman, it's a reflection on all women. But for men, it's like, oh, it's just that one man that is really bad, or, you know, whatever it is. And they get judged less harshly.
Yeah. And I think, you know, this thought process. So for me, when I first decided I wanted to run, or was getting the idea, because the Labor Party in my area too was endorsing candidates and we're going through a process, and I kind of had to make a decision about, do I want to go for pre-selection and all those conversations. And I talked to so many people in my life. I talked to my partner, my dad, my mum, and I just really thought, you know, how is this going to affect me? Also, I'm 27 years old, so I was also having thoughts in my head. These are quite formative years in my adult life still. I was just still coming into my own. Do I really want to put my hand up for public office? And I have this very good friend, love him. But one day I was talking to him about, you know, I think I'm going to put my hand up to run. What do you think? These are all my considerations. This is why it's going to be good for me. These could be the negatives to why, you know, I should run. And we had a great conversation, walk away. 2 days later, I talked to him and it's like, you know what? I've decided I'm going to run in my council. And I think that was a good point in my life about just the different thought process maybe, but also the confidence and the backing. And I know it's not that simple, because what you've said, Amy, is so true, and Wesa, about you just need to make these considerations. Like, we don't live in this, you know, easy universe where you can just say, I'm going to do this. You've got to consider family, consider what, like, you know, if this is the best for your career path. But I think, you know, we're all learning to back ourselves in more and more. This campaign has taught me, you know, to really have the confidence. But I think in that moment, my jaw just dropped, because if he had known the mental gymnastics I had done to get to a point where I was finally ready to go through a pre-selection process, and then he had just kind of gone, yeah, you know what, I think it would be a cool experience, I'm going to do it. So
also the continued mental gymnastics that you go through from where to go. I still, every week, I think, what am I doing? Am I doing the right thing? What have I signed up for? I know deep down it is the right thing, and I'm passionate and I want to set an example, especially for my daughter. But it's exhausting what you go through in your own head because of the external pressures and expectations that are put on women. And I don't think a lot of people actually consider that. I think this, you know, when you look at the considerations of what we've all been through with crafting our own campaigns, I go to the fact that I'm not endorsed, so I'm not supported by a party. I don't have any infrastructure behind me, 100% a self-funded independent. So I had to launch this campaign in April, when people were not thinking about government elections at all. But I had to play the long game and get myself out into the community to basically go for a 6-month job interview to prove that I was qualified for the job. I note that the male people in the race have all nominated the week of and are running short, sharp campaigns that they can just throw money at. But they also have the privilege to be able to do that. Men don't have to spend as long convincing people that they have skills, that they are qualified, because generally the leadership skills that men have are widely thought of in the community and widely regarded. Oh, he's worked in business. Oh, he's on the board of a footy club. Oh, But for me, my skills, which I argue are just as valuable in a community role, being a negotiator, as someone who has to negotiate a toddler to put her seatbelt back on while you're driving up Mountain Highway, you know, a negotiator with schools, parents and school communities, someone who works is a frontline worker. I argue that I have skills that are just as valid, but I have to spend a long time building that narrative. And that has been incredibly frustrating to me at times, because again, it can go either way. It's like, well, why are you going so early? Why are you're a political animal? You know, you can't be in the middle. You're either too pushy because you've launched your campaign early, or, you know, you have to work really hard. It's just, it's a wild ride. And I guess I'm interested maybe with you, Wesa, especially because you're running in an area where, like you said, the stakes are high and there's a lot of branding and association that goes with the City of Melbourne. What's your process been like, and how have you managed those expectations for yourself and I guess the optics of your campaign? How's that worked for you?
Yeah, very similar to you, Amy, that I feel like I have to justify my experience, and also partly because I look younger than my age as well. So running as Deputy Lord Mayor, people assume, well, you know, you must have had experience, a lot of experience before you'd be running in that role. And so I actually spent a lot of time and effort thinking about the photo. So when I was doing my campaign photo, I made sure that I did the whole thing, you know, the full makeup, because of the fact that I look younger. So I actually had 2 sets of photos done. The first set, I was looking at myself thinking, nah, that's just not going to cut it, because I look like I was in my 20s, and yeah, so I thought, I really need to get another set of photo done. And so, and I do wonder whether or not other people would, especially men, whether or not they actually need to think about these things, or it's just because, you know, any photos would work for them. Most of them don't really have to think about the makeup. But, you know, as a woman, this is something that you have to consider. And being an Asian woman that look young, it might be good in certain circumstances, but definitely not when you're running for a leadership role.
Yeah, really good points there. And I think also you raise a good point about, we've spoken a lot about gender. Obviously, it's something that we share. But I think age is something that also, you know, I got told early on, don't run hard on the fact that there's no councillors under 50, because it will, you know, disenfranchise a certain section of the community. And then as I actually got along and actually started talking to the community, I realised there was a hunger to have young, energetic people on our council. But it's a balance for me, right? I'm a young mum. I don't want to be too young. I don't want to be too old and crusty like, you know, the people, you know, that I'm running against. You know, I want to look different. But I'm really particularly interested, Ismene, with you. You're under 30. And often it's dangerous to be a woman and under 30 because you are classified as a girl. You're classified as inexperienced. You're classified as immature. And I just want to know, how have you managed that kind of, label that's been put on you? If you have chosen to acknowledge it, or you're just pushing on regardless, how has it been for you?
Yeah, great point. And in Moreland, especially my ward, we're running a Labor ticket, 3 women under 30. And it's just, you know, that wasn't exactly planned, but it kind of did fall like that. But in saying that, we have a wealth of experience within that. We have a sitting councillor, and Olivia is a sitting councillor. She's already been on council for 4 years.
And a superstar too. Like, she's amazing.
A superstar, a mum, a social worker. So, you know, I've worked in government for a long time. And then we do have Rebecca, who, you know, has been president of the Oxygen Youth Committee in Moreland and done a range of other community work. So, but great question. How do you combat that? We don't talk about being 3 young women. And Olivia, you know, really presents herself a lot older, really more experienced. She can go on that incumbency, talk about what she's done on council. I'm kind of a bit in the middle. Again, I didn't want my photos to look too young because we're just 2 young women. So I was trying to, even though I had just finished my master's recently, but I don't really talk about that because that makes you look like you've just come out of uni, even though I'd worked for a number of years, gone back to do my master's, and then gone back into the workforce. So just about the language that you use, also trying to like really differentiate yourself. So, this is one person's interest, this is another person's interests. And then Rebecca, who is the youngest, she is kind of like our young woman running, which is funny because we're all under 30, but we can't all, have the same narrative that we're all young women running. And I think, we are excited by that ticket. I think Moreland is a great place to have 3 young women running. I think they're really receptive to that. But I think there's a lot of people who aren't receptive to that. And I do a lot of phone banking and I talk to people on the phones, and women are so much more receptive to me, like really take me seriously. Men that I talk to on the phone don't really take me seriously until I tell them that I've worked here for a number of years and I've worked there. I think I also sound a little bit young over the phone. So it's just kind of balancing, not trying to be up yourself and say, look at all my resume, but also try to put yourself out there and say, look, I do have the experience to make some decisions for our community.
Yeah, I think it's a balance as well. You want to prove to the community that you're experienced and you'll bring some things to council that possibly will be beneficial for the wider community, but you also don't want to sound like a bragging know-all. And I think we go back to the fact that I don't think a lot of men care or have to worry about it as much as women. It's certainly interesting how we all have to manage the optics of our campaign based on our gender, our age, our ethnicity. And, it's one of these things that I hope it gets better, but it's certainly something that I think a lot of women battle when they choose to stand for public office.
Yeah, I would echo that as well, because even for me, having done many university courses and currently doing a PhD and won a number of awards as well, I have to really think twice about putting it down, especially putting everything down, because you don't want to brag about your achievements. But then at the same time, you don't want to undersell yourself, because people want to see, you can actually have the experience and the understanding to actually get into council. So it's a really fine balance, and I do wonder whether or not men actually have to think about these things, or they just run and not really necessarily have to think about these things. And I do think that women sometimes have to be more competent in order to be accepted by the community to be in a senior role. So it's always a balancing act. So I do wonder then, how did you guys fundraise? Because obviously fundraising during this time is it's difficult. Fundraising is difficult for everybody, but particularly during this time under COVID. So how has your fundraising experience been? Maybe we'll start with you, Ismene.
Yeah, so also just to follow what Amy said earlier with my social media, I was about to launch my social media right in the middle of when, the first, we're having our first wave of pandemic cases. And I didn't want to be insensitive. So I'm like, do I launch a social media campaign? And, kind of get that feedback that maybe this wasn't the best time? Do I leave it for later, but then I've kind of missed my opportunity to really, put myself out there in the community and get some name recognition? And with that, a lot of what I was thinking was, the longer I leave it is the longer that I can let people know that I'm running, and can you please donate to my campaign? So though I'm a Labor endorsed candidate, and that comes with a lot of benefits, such as the branding, having a community of Labor members around you, and, people know where you align. All my fundraising has come from friends and family. So, to ask for money in a time where, you've seen people close to you have their hours reduced, have had, obviously some people have had their work cut from them. It's quite challenging. So I did do a couple posts, but no way I, really went ahead fundraising the way I would have if it was not COVID times. I personally didn't think it was appropriate. And I also, was again thinking about the ramifications that if I, was putting myself out there saying, hey, if you guys can give to my campaign, what people would think of me.
Yeah.
Totally agree with that. I mean, that was exactly the same experience for me as well. And especially in Melbourne City Council, there's so many businesses that had to close their doors. So you wouldn't be going there and ask, well, I didn't think it was appropriate to, knock on their door and say, hey, you just lost all your business, but can you give me some money to run my campaign? So it's been really hard. How about you, Amy?
Well, I think I offer a really interesting perspective here. So I think I mentioned I'm a self-funded independent, but I'm a member of the Labor Party. So we don't endorse out here, and that was a decision by the local FEA. There was we had our last state conference and we decided that Labor would be looking to endorse local government candidates. Our FEA had a robust debate and voted against it. So there are pros and cons to it. For me, I have had a really enjoyable time running and creating a narrative that is just purely about me. It's about what I am and who I care about, which, when it comes down to it, are core Labor values. I've never tried to hide that I'm a member of the Labor Party. I'm often asked, and I answer. I say I am running as a self-funded independent. However, I am a government school teacher and unionist who is a member of the Labor Party. It speaks to who I am as a working class progressive, and I'm proud of that. And I think that it was something that really stressed me out early on. I felt like I was lying to the community, and I know I wasn't, but it's the optics of it. Some people, and I felt also some people, and I'm getting it even this week, members, local members of the Liberal Party, for example, who are like trying to trap me and trick me out in that I'm lying and I'm deceiving the community, and I'm just not. So I've run my campaign the way I intend to be as a councillor, and that's approachable, open, honest, and transparent. So that's been an interesting thing to have to manage. But with that comes zero infrastructure, and I have done everything by myself, including I have a wonderful branch out here, but they're not interested. They voted not to be involved in local government elections because they think that party politics should stay out of local government elections, and that's there. So the support as far as that kind of infrastructure hasn't been there, and it's literally been me running my campaign when my daughter sleeps and my husband helping with some of my comms and technology stuff, because that's sort of what he does for a job. And when it came to fundraising, I'm going to... So I debated whether to share this story, but I think I need to share this story because I want young women who are listening now to take this advice. I thought, I have spent so much of my 20s campaigning for Labor men and Labor candidates who get lots of party infrastructure and lots of party support, lots of media attention. And, I argue they make a lot of sacrifices and they work really, really hard. But I've done that work for them, knocked on doors for them, rang people for them. So I got out my phone and I picked up the phone and I rang people and I flat out asked them for money. And I said, this is my first opportunity. I worked on this campaign for you. I'm asking you for donations. And it felt uncomfortable and it felt strange, but I'm like, I watched those men do that when they launched their campaigns. So, it was actually met with some really amazing support. I also posted on my own personal Facebook, I'm about to do this and I'm, it's not supported. And people came out of the woodworks, old bosses, family friends, people that I just didn't think were interested, gave me large sums of money, which was quite a surprise, and I felt so humbled. And I also have had just people who have basically found, because I have played the long game and I've been working to sort of raise my profile in the community, people who have reached out to me that I don't know, who have donated money to me because they're excited to see a woman under the age of 35 who's a teacher, who seems intelligent, who understands climate change, who wants to make this community better. They want to get me elected and they've donated money to me. So that has been quite humbling and quite unexpected. And I guess it comes down to, if any women who are listening at the moment, it is a tricky thing to manage, having to ask people to pay money for you to basically, further your political career. But you lose nothing by asking, and do what a man would do and ask. If you believe what you're doing, ask people to support you.
Yeah, I'm really curious because you, Amy, you're running as an independent. So how are you organising volunteers and people who are actually helping you with the campaign? Because to cover the whole area requires a lot of human resource.
So if you to get a snapshot of the street and ward, we basically, I would say majority of it is Mount Dandenong. So up, down, hills and stuff. I'm really lucky being a school teacher. I have an amazing school community behind me of parents who are really excited, and they're homeschooling at the moment and they wanted to letterbox for me. So that's been really exciting. But I have about 10 volunteers who've done letterboxing for me, who literally contacted me on social media and said, wow, what a change this will be on Yarra. How can we help? And they've letterboxed for me. I've got a retired couple who live in Montrose who basically did a third of the suburb for me. They're in their 70s. They love to walk and they wanted to see a teacher on council. I've got lots of local mums helping me because they feel really strongly about the fact that they're not reflected on council, and they've wanted to letterbox for me or host a sign. People that aren't political at all have been messaging me this week to say, I voted for you. I'm not interested in politics, but I really like you and I want to see you on council. So I think being my authentic self, and having the freedom to not be attached to the Labor brand, not that I'm not proud of it, but having the freedom to really own what makes me me, and not have to, have my comms approved by someone at head office, or have my messaging approved by someone who's probably more talented than me to do the messaging, has kind of resulted in a really authentic and almost daggy campaign. And I think it's played well in the community.
How about you, Ismene? Because you've got the infrastructure support from head office. How has that experience been? Did it take a lot of time for head office to approve messaging and getting those graphics out?
So head office provides us with some designs, some graphics, but really it's the team, it's the local team. I mean, we're running on local issues, we're having conversations here in Moreland, so a lot of all our material really is designed by us, the candidates, and what we want to put out there. But I think it has been great to have we're a multi-member ward, so we've got 4 candidates that get elected. It's a really big area in Moreland. So, I mean, yes, it's been fantastic to be able to say, hey, I'm a Labor candidate, you're a Labor member, can you please help me with some letterboxing? I think we have a lot of independents that run here, and, I've talked to them, and, I mean, if you can get a lot of support, I mean, people have managed it by friends and family doing it, but I think, yes, it has been helpful to have just that traditional infrastructure that you can just, go and call out to, rather than starting that from scratch. But so much of letterboxing has been, my family and my friends who live around the corner from me. And, another thing in the pandemic is that it's really hard to get people from outside, your ward to come help you. So you're really limited. I've done more walking. I should have known I was going to do a lot of walking, and I did know that, but I've done a lot more walking than I thought I would, because, you're really limited to how many people can come and help you.
Yeah, for me it's a little bit different because we run as a whole team. And so for me, our materials needed to go through both team and also head office. But we spent a lot of time actually looking at all the policies that the whole team are comfortable with. So we actually went out to the whole, all the branches within the area to ask for feedback, ideas, anything that they want. So we actually did a lot of engagement within the branches. And that's been really good because we get some interesting insights into what some of the branches are thinking, and also what some of the local people are thinking as well, and all the things that they find not working for them. Because Labor has not endorsed a ticket for I think about 30 years in City of Melbourne now, so it's a big thing for the whole party, and I think the local branches are actually quite excited that we're actually endorsing a ticket. So it's a different experience, I guess, in the City of Melbourne.
Even, you know, I live in the Yarra Ranges, but I identify as Melburnian, and I'm really proud to watch what's happening with that organised ticket. And even my husband, who's a Labor member, but I would argue, you know, is less engaged than me, he's really proud that he can actually point to a ticket, and he's one of those people that gets to vote as a business that operates in the city, and he's really proud that there's a ticket that actually stands for something. And I think the optics of it looks really smick, and you guys are doing a marvellous job in a time where we're really constricted to how we can campaign, and I think you guys are you're nailing it, really.
Thank you. And one of the things that we do wanted to really push is that we want to lead the sector, and to show people how we can have a progressive government in the capital city. And that is one of the narratives that we've been pushing as well, because it's not just a Labor ticket running in another council. It's because we really want to lead this sector. And to get people to really think about, well, what can Labor offer in local council? How can we drive our progressive agenda within the council? And one of the things that we've been we will be pushing for is having free childcare. We are not afraid to have big councils. We are not afraid to have to employ more people in our council, especially during this time. We see a lot of women losing their jobs. We need to find ways to start employing them as well.
Absolutely.
How have you been going, Wesa, with like community conversations? And, you know, I'm just talking about my experience with like phone banking, like the misinformation out there with, you know, we are in a pandemic. There has been a lot of, you know, debate in our community, whether people agree or disagree with the direction of, you know, how Dan and the team have kind of dealt with this pandemic. I find this such an interesting conversation when I talk to different candidates about their responses, especially if you're Labor endorsed. It might be a bit different. If you're Labor endorsed, people, you know, tend to, of course, associate you a bit more closely with the state government. And if you're an independent, it might be a bit different.
I mean, it depends on who I call, really. So depending on, you know, the phone list that I get on that particular day. But what I've noticed is if I talk to people of Chinese backgrounds, they tend to be okay with the restrictions. And some of them even said to me, it's not strict enough. They would rather go hard and stop people from going outside for like 2 weeks, and then try and reduce the numbers dramatically and then open up. Whereas there are other people who are really upset with the lockdown. So it really depends on the different groups of people that I talk to. And yeah, I'm curious to see what others' experiences are.
I mean, I don't get I'm not phone banking because I don't have the infrastructure as someone who's not endorsed. So I had to really go back to community and grassroots stuff. So the very day that we could, I spent the weekend leading up to, we had that Monday where we were allowed to start actively campaigning within the safe campaigning guidelines. So I spent the weekend packing packages for businesses that are open, because a lot of, I would say, maybe like a quarter, we've probably got 1/4 of businesses operating at the moment. And it was a letter from me, a postcard, which was going into, like, basically what was going into my mailboxes, and a poster. And it was a letter just saying, hi, my name's Amy, I'm a local teacher, I'm a local mum. These are, you know, I'm running for council and I want to talk to you. I just thought I'd formally introduce myself, and here's a poster if you want to put it up. Really passive aggressive, but I would go in, buy a coffee. Hello, my name's Amy. And I've got a box of them in my car. So if I go to a new business, even now, I'll give them. And it's just a little introductory pack to who I am. So it's that community kind of putting yourself out there to introduce yourself in a really non-aggressive way. And to my surprise, I reckon maybe I would say 3/4 of the businesses I gave my post to do put it up, because I took the effort and energy to go and do that and actually give them something that was just for them as a business owner. But then also I've been, like, Zoom has been the thing. I've basically said to everyone in the sporting clubs, concerned locals, community groups, toy libraries, all those things that make, council tick. I've put myself out there because I want to be a really accessible council. We've had the same councillors for a really long time in the Yarra Ranges. They've done a fine job, but this year they got onto Zoom because they had to. They started recording council meetings because they had to, and they've not been super accessible. So that's sort of my thing that I'm bringing to the role. Mm-hmm. So I've made sure that I've been having conversations and having it. I would, in a normal situation, I'd say, hey, let's meet for a coffee, let's go for a walk, let's take our kids to the park and have a play and have a chat. Can't do that. So Zoom's been the next best thing. So I've had to really sort of strip back. Can't make phone calls. All I can do is put my face out there, letterbox, and reach out to people who want to talk to me. And it's actually made me rely on the traditional things that we know work as grassroots organisers.
Yeah.
It's storytelling and authentic connection, isn't it?
I know. I think you're running a great campaign, Amy. Cannot wait to see the results of your hard work, honestly.
Oh, thank you.
So I think what I would love to hear is, what are your reflections or an experience that you want to share with the audience? It could be a moment you've had on the campaign, or just a takeaway, something you've learned about yourself during this time. Wesa, I'll start with you.
It's interesting. I think for me is every time I run, it's because previously I ran in a federal seat in the seat of Higgins a couple of years back. And one of the things that I've noticed during that time was that because before that I was an advocate, I was doing a lot of work fighting for the rights of international students and culturally diverse people from culturally diverse backgrounds. But then as soon as you put yourself out there as a politician as opposed to an advocate, somehow the media see you as you're a bad person because now you become a politician. So every time I run now, it's actually quite interesting where there's this shift. It's the media perception. It's not so much the people who support you. All the supporters are great. So if you tell people that you're running, all the supporters are like, great to see you there, all that type of stuff. But it's the media that somehow paints you as this nasty politician as soon as you put your hand up to run. So it's actually quite an interesting thing, because it's almost a journey for me to just be okay with the fact that people are not necessarily going to like me because of the fact that I put my hand up to run. So that's an interesting thing that I've noticed being a candidate and putting yourself out there as a candidate.
Yeah,
that is such a good point. As someone who inherently struggles with people not liking them and is a people pleaser, it has been a learning process to know that that's okay. You're going to have some people will just inherently not like you. Some people are very passive. Some people, we just have different opinions, but as long as I know why I'm doing this, I can live with that. Amy?
I think, I'll sort of dovetail off that. I think what I've learned about myself is that I can do this, that I'm talented, that I'm organised and I'm skilled, and I have the right to put my hand up for public office. And I say that with confidence today, but tomorrow it might be different. I it's a roller coaster for me. I feel like I sometimes feel a lot of guilt that I'm not giving perhaps my daughter the attention she needs, or I am not prioritising my marriage or things like that. It's a small part of, this 6-week period is a small chunk in my life, and I have an amazing partner standing beside me who champions me and is, tells me every day that he's proud, and a daughter that loves me regardless, as long as I put the Wiggles on Spotify. It's one of these things that I guess for me, I get really scared because I want to finish this campaign, win or lose, and look back and go, didn't make a deal of myself. And I'm proud of what I stood for and what I went out and fought for. And I'm starting to realise now that, we've got a week till it ends, a week, 2 weeks. I'm starting to realise that I will be able to do that, and that I have run a really good campaign in spite of having no infrastructure, in spite of managing the care of my daughter and a job as a part-time primary school teacher, in spite of running a household. I can do all these things, and I think a lot of women can do all these things. So I've actually, exceeded my own expectations, and moving forward, I've sort of made a promise to myself to seek out more opportunities to be a leader in my community, because I have a lot of doubts about myself, but I also think I've shown myself that I have a lot to give the community, and I shouldn't discount myself just because of my internal dialogue.
Amy, I totally agree. And what I just wanted to add to that was, it's so funny because we were talking about not wanting, that professional cost that comes with running multiple campaigns. But I'm also so proud of the campaign I've run. And I've learned so much that in my head, I keep thinking, next time I'm going to do this, this, and this. If I'm not successful right now, look at what I've learned. I've had so many takeaway experience where I've said, if I do this again, I'm going to handle it this way. I'm going to put this in my material. I'm going to have have this as a timeline. So, it's been quite a life-changing opportunity to put yourself out there and really have to advocate for yourself. And as someone who really struggles to back themselves in, it has been such a great learning process.
Absolutely. I think women are often reluctant to celebrate what they're good at. And I think we need to spend a lot more time reminding the community that we have a lot to give, and that we're worthy.
Absolutely. I think it's important that we all, give ourselves a pat on the back to say we can do this and we're good at this.
We're doing this as well on top of all the other things that women do. Running households, being primary caregivers, often, caring for parents, all those things that we do as women. And we do because, it's been written about. Men make better politicians because they've got wives at home taking care of stuff. It's one of these things that we need to remind ourselves we're doing this as well as all the other stuff. And it makes it, we're super women. If we're going to end this conversation, I think we should end it on positives and wrap up, and perhaps give each other, the kudos. I want to just say personally, it's such a privilege to be able to do this with you, Ismene, and someone like Wesa, who is a seasoned campaigner and I think will be a huge asset to the City of Melbourne. It's just inspiring watching, first of all, your advocacy work and what you've done, but also the fact that we as a Labor Party are putting up, a woman of a different minority who is as smart and as talented as you. It's great and very exciting to watch. And I guess I would sort of like to say maybe we should end on plugs or promotions or things. It's not over yet. We're at the pointy end. Ballots have hit. We still need help and we still need to get over the line. So maybe we'll start with you, Wesa. What do you want to tell the listeners today about your campaign and what you're going to achieve in the next 2 weeks?
Yeah, so as Amy mentioned, this is the pointy end, the last 2 weeks of our campaign. So any support that we can get with donations even, so you can donate this via the Labor Party website that we're happy to provide in the show notes. and also volunteers. Like people who are willing to, even if you don't live in the City of Melbourne and want to contribute to the campaign, we are doing a lot of phone banking. So if you can spare 2 hours of your time, any days, we really appreciate, if people can help out. So let us know. We'll have our contact details in our show notes as well, just so that you can contact us. And we'll also include our social media, like our stuff, share our stuff. Get as many people as possible to know about us. And because, especially in City of Melbourne as well, because we've got business voters, sometimes they might not necessarily be living in the city, but then they might actually have a business in the city that we don't know of. So if you know of people who are in that situation, we might have missed sending them stuff. So please share to your networks.
Excellent.
Yeah, and my plea is the same. Just if you have any friends or family who live in Moreland, please tell them to vote for me and Olivia and Rebecca, and give my Facebook page, Ismene Thiveos for Moreland, a like.
Excellent. Well, you've all summed it up for me. I'm in the same thing. My letterboxing's done. I'm about engagement now and getting out the vote. So I'm pretty much hitting the socials really hard. I'm promoting a lot of things. So please follow Amy for Streeton on Facebook. Find me on Instagram. Like, share, comment, drive up my engagement. I want to, prove and give people the opportunity to see that I'm not someone who goes and deletes comments when I'm questioned. I'm someone who's open and wants to talk to the community. And at the moment, social media is our best tool to do that. So please get behind me. Please also take an interest in the Yarra Ranges. It's going to be an exciting time with an opportunity to actually see women elected. We're one of the Fragile 13, sorry. So there are 13 councils in Victoria that only have one woman sitting. Yarra Ranges is one of them. So please watch carefully and get excited, because there are going to be some dynamic progressive women at the table in November for sure.
I'm very excited to see you all of us being elected.
And I think if not, I think it would be great. It's great. I think we'll see a lot more women hopefully putting their hand up. We've had records amount of women this year decide to nominate in spite of the global pandemic. And I think hopefully this is a wave of women who are gonna take over local governments.
Love it. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Great.